Today was day one of lockdown plus in the national capital region. Several areas put into a template which could be replicated in other areas as well post the 14th, a very stringent form of lockdown. So at the top of our show tonight, I want to look at what lockdown plus really meant for residents of the national capital region whose areas were completely sealed. They couldn't travel even to grocery stores. They were told groceries would come home. How did that pan out on the ground? Here is our lead story on the news track tonight.
A lockdown within the lockdown. COVID-19 hotspots in Delhi and Noida on Thursday morning were sealed, cutting them off from the rest of the city. In the national capital, the hotspots include Nizamuddin Basti, Nizamuddin East and West, parts of Malviya Nagar, Dwarka, Dilshad Colony and Vasundhara Enclave.
To contain the spread of the coronavirus, the Delhi government has identified 21 hotspots in the national capital which have been sealed with immediate effect. Right now, we are standing outside one such hotspot. This is the Mayur Dhwaj apartments in IP Extension, and you can see that the entire society has been barricaded. It has been sealed. There's police deployment outside the society. And let us remind you that when we say that this place has been identified as a hotspot, it means that no one is allowed to enter the society or even leave it.
The Sadar Bazaar, Delhi's largest wholesale market, faced strict restrictions after fresh coronavirus cases were reported.
I'm right now reporting right outside periphery of the Sadar Bazaar, which has gone under sealing due to the corona dense infection cases. And the government is now adopting ruthless testing method, and perhaps why these hotspots where there have been report of positive cases and several other pockets have completely been sealed, and all these places have now been cordoned off with the dense barricading by the Delhi police. So all the vehicles, those who are trying to move out on the road, are being restricted.
The Arvind Kejriwal government has made the use of face masks mandatory. The order came into effect on Thursday.
State governments have informed people that everybody is supposed to cover their face whether or not they are traveling somewhere. This is a family of people who is traveling from the Delhi-Noida border, and we see the police personnel asking them where they are going.
Intensive sanitization drive was carried out in all the 22 hotspots in Gautam Budh Nagar, which includes Noida and Greater Noida.
We are in sector 74 of Noida, and one of the societies, Supertech Cape Town, has been converted into hotspot for coronavirus. Now you can see in the visuals, Noida police has been deployed here on the main gate and also at the entrance, where they are checking everyone who is going inside or outside this society. As of now, we have been given to understand is that no person who is staying in this society, which comprises more than 1,000 flats, is allowed to leave from this society.
People who are part of the essential services residing in sealed housing societies faced problems.
जहाँ तक हमें सरकारी जो विज्ञप्तियाँ मिली है उसके अनुसार आवश्यक सेवा जिसमें बैंक भी शामिल है उन लोगों को जाने की अनुमति दी जानी चाहिए.
The Yogi Adityanath government has assured citizens that ration and other essential supplies will be delivered at people's doorsteps. The Noida administration has released a list of shops that will cater to these sealed housing colonies.
I would like to appeal and say that this decision of locking down has been taken by keeping in mind the welfare of not only the residents of the society and the villages that have been locked down, but also the society at large.
The restrictions in the hotspots are in place till the morning of April 15 to prevent further spread of infection. Bureau Report, India Today.
The one question I'm certain every single one of our viewers has in their minds is, has this lockdown been worth the while? Is the Indian government on the right approach? What more needs to be done? What have we got right? What have we got wrong? and what should be done post the 14th of April. I'm joined on the news track tonight live by one of the most articulate voices of the Bharatiya Janata Party, Swapan Dasgupta, squaring off against him, Manish Tiwari of the Congress. So welcome to both our guests. I want both of them to see this data set compiled by the Data Intelligence Unit of India today, and then we will start our debate. So has the lockdown been worth it? What I'll show you now is the average rate of growth of the coronavirus infection before the lockdown and then after. Remember, the lockdown came into effect at a time when the world thought that the rate of spread of the infection in India would skyrocket. What the lockdown has been able to ensure is that that didn't happen. Before the lockdown was imposed, and you see this on this part of the screen, the average rate of growth of the coronavirus infection was 20%. During the period of the lockdown, the moving average is 17%. So 17% is the rate of growth of the infection during the lockdown. What that means is that we've actually been able to contain, restrict and bring the average down, which is, given the fact that the virus is spiraling elsewhere, quite commendable. The flip side, though, is that the level of fatality from those who are confirmed to be corona positive, the level of fatality in India is quite high, and that's something that we hope to discuss on the show tonight. So what you have on your screen right now is a chart which looks at the deaths when 5,000 cases were reported in different countries of the world. When there were 5,000 cases, Sweden reported 282 deaths, Netherlands reported 276 deaths, Italy 234, UK 233, India comes in at 149. That's pretty high up. France, Iran, Spain, China, the United States, South Korea and Germany have a far lower rate of fatality. We aren't doing the worst in the world, but it's not as if we're doing fabulously well either, and that's something that needs to be looked at. The other thing which is of immense significance is the fact that President Trump in the United States, Bolsonaro in Brazil, the president of Sri Lanka, as also in the United Kingdom, leaders have come out and praised India's magnanimity at a time of great crisis. In fact, President Bolsonaro said India's actions and Prime Minister Modi's actions were like Hanuman during the Ramayana, who helped by providing the Sanjeevani booty. Has this magnanimity enhanced India's esteem in the eye of the world? I'll debate that tonight. Here is our report.
Your attention, please. Those of you that need translation.
Extraordinary times require even closer cooperation between friends. Thank you, India, and the Indian people for your decision. It will not be forgotten. Thank you, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, for your strong leadership in helping not just India, but humanity in this fight. You heard those words, right? That was a tweet late last night by President Donald Trump. 4 sentences that have reverberated across a world fighting a common enemy. The unprecedented words of praise coming a day after India agreed to a US request to release consignments of hydroxychloroquine for the US market. And while Prime Minister Modi has received the significant new dynamic by underscoring Indo-US friendship, American gratitude at a time when the US has the highest number of active COVID-19 cases in the world could mean very important gains for India going forward. While the US shouldn't be expected to act selflessly, India's generosity could possibly mean early access to US COVID-19 vaccines. It strengthens India's position in trade deal negotiations, could lead to US market access for Indian pharma companies. The generosity highlights India as a savior as opposed to China's scavenging business ethic. And finally, in a post-COVID-19 world, US investment could help India fight economic damage and job loss. It's not just the United States. India has come to the world's rescue in the fight against coronavirus. From Brazil to Sri Lanka to the United Kingdom, all have thanked India for playing savior by sharing medicines. While the Brazilian president drew a Hanuman parallel to thank India for the so-called Sanjeevani booty of hydroxychloroquine, India has sent some essential medicines and paracetamol to Sri Lanka and the United Kingdom. Under Prime Minister Modi, India has been at the forefront of the corona war. India convened the SAARC video conference on March the 15th and announced $10 million for a new coronavirus emergency fund. India has also dispatched doctors to the Maldives and Nepal. and is sending supplies to Afghanistan, Bangladesh and Bhutan. Prime Minister Modi is also exploring the possibility of setting up a video conference with the G20 leadership. With its humanitarian gestures, India has cemented its position as an emerging world power. Bureau Report, India Today.
At a time of grave crisis, when so many countries are looking within, is India's magnanimity raising our country's esteem in the eye of the world? Swapan Dasgupta is squaring off against Manish Tiwari on the news track tonight. I want to go across to the BJP. Swapan Dasgupta first. We've seen lots of pot shots from the opposition saying you haven't given us a full stock of how much hydroxychloroquine there is in the country. In the midst of all of this, apparently under pressure of retaliation, Prime Minister Modi removing the export ban on hydroxychloroquine, accepting President Trump's request. Why is it, sir, that you believe that India's actions at this moment are raising India's esteem in the eye of the world? Swapan Dasgupta will start tonight's debate. Give me just half a moment as I fix that line. Let me get in Manish Tiwari till then. Remember, we're entirely dependent on the quality of the broadband, which is firing this connection. Okay, I see Swapan now. Okay, sir, why is it that you believe that India's actions at the time of this grave medical crisis have raised our country's esteem in the eye of the world? Swapan Dasgupta.
Well, I don't think we necessarily looked upon as saviors, but I think that as a modestly successful power, which has taken very tough decisions internally, we are making the best use of what our capacities are. You know, I think what we have in this coronavirus crisis throughout the world, two very, very conflicting trends. The first is a move towards greater insularity, which is as evidenced by the fact that we are all closing our borders, partly act of self-defense, etc. At the same time, what we are trying to do is reach out to the world in whatever way we can, in a non-aggressive, somewhat benign and kind way. This is really something which may not yield us dividends immediately. It might even draw a lot of domestic criticism. But overall, the perception of India as a power which is there, which can be contrasted with that of China, which even after all that controversy about where the coronavirus emanated from, is still out to make a quick buck out of it. Against that, we have a certain capacity in very basic drugs. Paracetamol is one. The HCQ, which has suddenly come into great demand, is another one. And we are trying to get and say, these are our capacities, these are our industry, these are our strengths. And we share it with the world. And I think this outward reach, while protecting ourselves internally, I think is stand us in good stead. But however, I would urge one more thing, that a post-coronavirus foreign policy is something which is still work in progress. This gesture of India gives us many more options with which we need to work, which we can work with in the coming days.
Tiwari, as a benign world power at a time when countries are closing their doors, India is opening its hearts, taking care of its own requirements and helping those we can. Why are so many in the Congress taking pot shots at the government's approach, saying that what's being done is not right and insinuating that this has actually been done under the threat of retaliation from President Trump? Manish Tiwari.
Rahul, you need to make a distinction between two situations. First of all, I always have believed and continue to believe that it is humanitarian to help out people when they require it, especially if you have appropriate and adequate stock in order to protect yourself. So therefore, at a point in time when you're dealing with a global pandemic, I do not think a very insular, national or nationalistic approach really works. Today, you are helping the United States of America, you are helping Brazil. Tomorrow you may require them in equal measure. So therefore, it always helps to help out people, especially when they reach out to you. The second thing which is very important is that the post-COVID world, whenever it comes, is going to be an absolutely different kettle of fish altogether. For example, the institutions of global governance have completely and absolutely collapsed. You've had the United States, the United Nations Security Council, which has been unable to meet, despite the fact that humanity is confronting the single biggest challenge which it has faced in possibly the last 1 century. You have the World Health Organization, which has come in for a lot of criticism from countries around the world for an approach which seemed to be extremely protective about warnings which should have come out much, much earlier from China. So therefore, once this settles down, and we do hope that this settles down for the betterment of humanity as early as possible, you are going to see a reimagination of both domestic politics. You are going to see a reimagination of global institutions of governance. You will find that the entire neoliberal economic order, the Washington Consensus, being revisited. Already far right-wing conservative newspapers across the world in editorials and leaders have been calling out and saying that we need to relook at all these paradigms. The far more robust social security models of Northern Europe is something which will be looked at very acutely. So therefore, I don't think you can really extrapolate from whatever you do today in terms of helping out a country or another because of humanity to what would be the global power dynamic in the post-COVID world.
Swapan Dasgupta, one of the points of criticism of the opposition has been that the government hasn't done enough when it comes to providing cash in the hands of the poor, those who are dispossessed. A report from the Center of Monitoring of the Indian Economy says unemployment is now at 23%. That's more than 3 times a 40-year high. P. Chidambaram, the former finance minister, Jean Reyes, and several others saying the government has the capacity to do much more. So far, they believe it hasn't done enough. How do you respond to that, sir?
Well, I don't disagree with the fundamental notion that we need to break out of the old mold of regulating the fiscal deficit. And I think that's really the biggest political decision which has got to be taken. And I think the consensus for it exists across party lines. So that's the first step. Once you take that decision, and I think that decision in principle has really been taken, it hasn't been formally announced. The second point, which I also don't disagree with some of the opposition points, is that much more needs to be done. But the important thing is that you need to have it completely targeted. And I think one of the biggest problems which we have faced in this targeting is how do you identify the urban poor? You've got the Jan Dhan accounts as one form, but the Jan Dhan accounts actually cover a far more. Secondly, the point is there are people who were normally, before this crisis broke out, actually employed, albeit on a casual basis, in various sectors. Now, because of this crisis, they've been thrown out of jobs. They're not destitute in that absolute sense, but they're living something. How do you get the absolute mechanism in which direct benefit payments can be made to the really the needy? And I think this is the mechanism why there's been a delay in actually handing over this much money to who need it most. Rural areas are well catered for. There's been no talk about rural distress as yet. I think there are problems which are coming, there are challenges, I would say, which are coming up in terms of the harvesting season, etc., which will be met. But in terms of the urban poor, in the urban who are the less well-off, let's put it this way, and those who've been dislocated by the corona lockdown, I think the targeting is something worked on And you could say that, well, it should have been there earlier. But the point is, it's something which is done. But I hope that by the 13th, before the lockdown this particular phase of the lockdown is over, Prime Minister will actually, through either directly or through the finance minister or some other ministers, be able to some of them. So I think the basic concerns of both the opposition and the government are exactly the same. The opposition is saying you should have done it by now. The government is saying yes, we could have done it, but there are these problems. And I think
Manish Tiwari, there were many, sir, in the opposition who questioned when all those Jan Dhan accounts were being opened with zero balance. What the Jam Trinity did was create an architecture with which direct benefit transfers have been sent. I saw some images from Florida. Huge queues as people were lining up for their unemployment benefits. In India, money going straight into accounts. How do you believe, since you think so much of policy planning, how do you believe we should address the issue of the urban poor who've been dispossessed at this time? They don't come under the Kisan Yojana. We can't map them so quickly and have money sent into them. Ordinarily, as Swapan Dasgupta says, they do not well, but they survive. Now suddenly they're dispossessed and unemployment in India is at a historic high. How should we address that challenge? What view do you have to offer, sir?
Well, I think that is going to be a fundamental challenge going forth. So therefore, you will really have to put them into two separate buckets. One is all those dispossessed migrants, who walked hundreds of kilometers back home because completely heartless and soulless cities just decided to abandon them to their fate. And so therefore, as they get back home, you will have to see as to whether they have those Jan Dhan accounts whereby you will be able to provide them with a certain amount of relief which they require at this point in time. Second would be with regard to the urban poor. And that's where your Panchayati Raj institutions, your municipal corporations, your municipal councils, your councillors and your ward officers will have an extremely important role to play, because you will have to physically map out each and every person or each and every family which requires succor in this day of destitution and distress. And then you would have to ensure that either they have bank accounts or there are other means which are made available in order to see that money or aid is transferred to them. But to Swapan's point that rural distress has not as yet manifested itself, I would respectfully disagree. I represent a parliamentary constituency which is predominantly rural, with small urban agglomerations dotting it. And there is a problem on the ground. At this point in time, villagers are helping out the rural poor. They are trying to provide food grains, and they are trying to provide cooked food from their own resources. At some point in time, government is also chipping in. But what has also happened is that each village has been almost converted into a quasi-republic, with villagers having barricaded it because they do not want outsiders, or they do not want anybody who's carrying the virus to really come into their village, who's not a part of their community or their milieu. So therefore, there is going to be difficulties even in terms of accessing villages if, God forbid, the pandemic rate or the rate of infection goes up. And as I was currently looking at the figures, while in percentage terms as compared to the total population of India, they mercifully remain low. But if you look at the trajectory over the last 5 to 10 days or 2 weeks, the trajectory should start worrying people.
Okay. As Swapan Dasgupta put it, as a modestly successful power, we're trying to help the world at a time when other countries are looking in. I think that's the key message. So there isn't a disagreement about the need to extend help further to the poor. It's only about how quickly we can get this done. That's the consensus largely on this discussion. Swapan Dasgupta and Manish Tiwari for joining us on the News Track tonight. Thank you very much. When we come back, we'll shift our attention to plasma therapy. which essentially involves taking blood cells from those who have immunity against the coronavirus and giving it to those who...
Hi everyone, Preeti Chaudhary here. Hope you like this video. For latest news and analysis, like and subscribe to the India Today YouTube channel. And don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated. Thank you for watching.